All right, everyone. Today I wanted to share with you a really big mistake that I'm starting to see a lot of people do in Diablo 4. And this is a mistake that has to do with wasting a bunch of time on something that you don't need to be wasting it on. And this has to do with your Codex of Power. It has to do with all the different dungeons scattered across the game. And it has to do with Renown. And I'm going to tell you guys that you really want to consider not doing these dungeons too early. And all this time that you end up spending on these dungeons early is, in a sense, going to end up being wasted. Now, don't get me wrong, if you need to do a couple of dungeons for specific legendary powers that you need for your build in order for your build to work, that's totally fine. That's not what I'm discouraging. What I am discouraging is going above and beyond that and working on, completionist and doing all these dungeons and getting too many of them done out of the way early, especially before you end up getting to World Tier 3, before you do your capstone dungeon, before you finish the campaign. You really want to avoid doing too many of these dungeons. Now, I know that's a lot to take in here, and I'm going to explain to you guys step by step why this is going to be a big waste of time and a big mistake. And of course, as the video goes on, it's going to kind of tick in your head. You're going to be like, okay, that actually makes sense. So we've got the Codex of Power here. We've got the Renown system, of course. Now, very importantly, Renown is going to be something you're going to want to work on getting the third reward here, but you can end up getting to the third reward in all the different categories without really having to do any of the dungeons. You can end up getting this third category reward unlocked just by doing your explorers and collecting your statues of Lilith. And this is just going to take a couple hours. Definitely worth doing this. In fact, the earlier that you do that, specifically the explorers and the statues of Lilith, the better, because that time later on is actually going to be better useful on other stuff to progress your character. Early on, you want to knock that out, and that should end up getting you the first, second, and the third benchmark for your Renown. Now, the big one that a lot of people are wasting time on is the actual dungeons. Now, if you take a look at the Renown map here, you'll see I've got the waypoints, I've got the strongholds, I've got the explorers, and I've got the statues of Lilith, but that second to last one right there is something that is going to be in progress for a while, but not forever. And if you end up working on these too early, you're going to notice that this time is very likely going to end up being wasted. Now, what do I mean by that? Why is this time going to end up being wasted? Well, it's because of something that I like to call double dipping or knocking two birds out with one stone. And this is something that isn't just going to apply to these actual dungeons. As you get to the end game, you're actually going to be able to double dip and knock out two birds with one stone with a lot of different end game activities, which is going to allow you to be really efficient with your time, because not only are you actually end up getting rewards for one thing, at the same time that you're getting rewards for that one thing, you're actually getting rewards for something else as well. And there's a couple of different ways that this actually works, but one of them is going to actually interact with the various different dungeons. Now, I'll explain two different ways that you can double dip to unlock these different dungeons through the Codex of Power so that you don't end up having to do them early. You're actually going to get basically all of these done in the end game no matter what. Now, it might take you a little while, but that's okay, because when it comes to the Renown grind, it's really the first three that you're going to get early on, and the fourth and the fifth ones are going to be a long-term grind. You can almost think of it as like the grind to level 100. It's something that eventually you're going to be working on, but it's not something that you're going to want to rush to get done in the first couple of days, because it will get done eventually. Now, going back to this whole concept of double dipping the dungeons and the Codex of Power, there's a couple of different ways that you can do this, and one of them is going to end up being through the Tree of Whispers and your Grim Favors. Now, if you end up taking a look at the map, you're going to see all these different icons in red, and those are going to be various different dungeons. And if you actually take a look at my icons here, you're going to see that basically almost all the dungeons at this point in the game, I run very, very few of my Codex of Power dungeons. You can see here my Codex of Power is only like 15% complete. So very likely, if I end up seeing a Tree of Whispers objective on my map for a dungeon, there's a very high chance that that's going to be a dungeon for a first-time completion. And if you're wondering, it is true. You actually end up getting the Grim Favors, working on your Tree of Whispers, while also end up unlocking the Codex of Power at the same time. So you're basically double dipping, knocking two birds out with one stone, and you are getting rewards for two different things while spending the time on just doing the same thing. It's the same dungeon that you're running just one time, but you're getting the Grim Favors, and you're also unlocking the Codex of Power. And of course, while you're running the dungeons and unlocking the Codex of Power, that's also going to help build up your Renown and end up working on your fourth and your fifth objective for all the different zones. So you can see how a lot of these different endgame systems actually kind of compile together and double dip in a way where they all work together together, and if you're efficient, you can really plan this out in a way where you're doing specific things in particular, but while you're doing, you know, one thing in specific, you're actually working on unlocking rewards and you're progressing your character in many different ways, and that's going to be one of them right there. But that's not the only one. That's just one example right there. Is going to be through the Tree of Whispers and the Grim Favors. But there's another one as well, and this one is actually very likely going to be more important for you, and this is going to be something that I would imagine most, if not all, people spend quite a bit of time on, because it's going to be really important in the end game, and that is actually going to end up being your Nightmare Dungeons. Now, when you end up getting to level 50 and you get to World Tier 3, you finish the campaign, do your capstone dungeon, you're going to end up getting these various different sigils here, which are going to be for your Nightmare Dungeons. Now, I'm not going to get into the full details of how Nightmare Dungeons work here, but let me just say that the same thing that I just explained for the Grim Favors Tree of Whisper, and working on that at the same time as unlocking your Codex of Power and your Renown, the same thing is going to apply to your Nightmare Dungeons. You can actually end up running your Nightmare Dungeons and working on that, working on upgrading your glyphs and getting more sigils and getting your sigils leveled up, tiered up, because these go, I think, all the way up to tier 100. While you're doing that, for all the different dungeons that you actually haven't done in the game yet, you are indeed going to end up getting the first time completion bonus. So very, very important. When you actually end up taking a look at your various different Nightmare Sigils, you can see through the various different text. This one says Conclave Nightmare Sigil, Sacred Nightmare Sigil Tier 2. Transform this dungeon into a Nightmare Dungeon, and you do actually have to run out to the Nightmare Dungeon in the game. But you'll see the next line of text is the important one, where it says Conclave and Kyrgyzstan. And then if you look at different sigils, you'll see the different locations that they're at. And if you end up taking a look at your map, you can actually see, have I run this location yet? Have I unlocked the Codex of Power? And have I actually got the Renown for my Renown progress? And while you do these different Nightmare Dungeons, if you haven't run it before, it is going to count for all those different rewards. So you can see that through the Grim Favors, Tree of Whispers, through the Nightmare Dungeons, and through these various different systems of double dipping in the game, very likely over time, as you're going to be running a lot of Tree of Whispers, you're going to be running a lot of Nightmare Dungeons, you're very likely going to basically unlock all of these dungeons anyway. So eventually you're going to end up getting all of the different Codex of Power legendaries. You're going to end up getting all of the... you're going to end up getting the Renown points as well for unlocking your Renown. So, you know, eventually this is going to happen. It might take some time, of course, because there's a lot of different dungeons, and it's going to probably take you quite a bit of Tree of Whispers and quite a bit of Nightmare Dungeons to end up getting through them all. But like I said earlier on, as long as you end up getting the first 3 objectives for your Renown rather quickly through the Statues of Lilith and the Explorers, the 4th and the 5th one are going to be more of a marathon. And eventually, as you are working on progress for your character in other ways, you are going to end up getting these objectives done anyway. So if you think back to it, all that time that you end up spending doing these in the normal difficulty, you know, no Tree of Whispers or no Nightmare Dungeon applied, a lot of that time is going to be wasted because you're just going to end up unlocking this stuff later on. Now, again, I'll circle back to that important point that I said, that if you do end up needing to do, you know, a couple of these Codex of Power dungeons in order to unlock certain powers to make your build work, that's totally fine. In fact, that you absolutely should do. But going above and beyond that and really working on like a completionist sense of doing these too early, a lot of that time is just going to end up being wasted. So anyway, I threw a lot of info at you guys in this video. I introduced a few important concepts that I'm sure I'm going to talk about in more detail in other videos, especially double dipping and getting lots of efficiency with your rewards and your progress on your character. But that's going to be it for now. So I threw a lot in this video, and hopefully it helped out. Hopefully you enjoyed. If you did, and you are looking forward to more videos like this in the future, consider leaving a quick like. Really do appreciate it. And if you are new to the channel and you are looking for more informative Diablo 4 videos, definitely consider subscribing for alerts for videos in the future. With that being said, everyone, I hope you all enjoy. I hope you have a fantastic Diablo 4 gameplay experience. I know the official launch is coming out around now, and more videos coming out soon. Thanks again, everyone, and until next time.